Greetings, folks. It's a pleasure to see you. My name is Dustin Cormier. This is another episode of How to Rock Astrology, where we are going to discuss some techniques used in what I call Tropical Vedic Astrology. If you want to know more about the tropical sidereal debate, you can check out other videos on my channel. But I am a Vedic astrologer using Western measurements, tropical measurements, even though in our camp we say that Vedic was originally tropical. Now today we're using some techniques that I've learned from our man, the patriarch, Ernst Wilhelm. So you will find these techniques by looking up Venus is your woman, as well as Jupiter is your man, as well as Darakaraka is your spouse in astrology. It follows the same idea. So for those of you watching, it's important for us to note here, this is basing relationship astrology on gender. So if you consider yourself to be somebody who identifies as a man, then you would want to watch the Venus is your woman video. If you consider yourself to be someone who is a woman, you want to watch the Jupiter is your man video. And if you are of a bisexual or homosexual person, you're going to want to use a little bit of both, but men are typically going to still use Venus to find their man if they're gay, and women are going to use Jupiter to find their woman if they are gay. And non-binary people can make use of both. Non-binary people can make use of both pretty well equally. Gay people can also make use of both, but again, men will look for Venus in their partner and women will look for Jupiter in their partner. The Darakaraka spans both of these genders. So no matter what your gender is, you look at your Darakaraka and use this same technique to discover some qualities of your relationship capacity. That's what we're really looking at here. So what we're going to find is that you're going to learn a little bit about your natural relationship capacity, typically, especially through the planet that resonates with your gender, in finding the opposite sex, or in just a partner in general, and through the Darakaraka. So the technique that we're using here comes from these videos that are supplied by Ernst Wilhelm. And these are old techniques. What we're basically looking for, and we're going to show my chart in just a moment, I use Kala Vedic Astrology software. What we're looking for is the placement of our relationship planets in the D7 chart and the D9 chart, as well as positive and negative, friendly or enemy aspects to those relationship planets. Of course, in a reading, you want to use everything. You want to look at your 7th Lord, you want to look at your 4th Lord, you want to look at your 2nd Lord, and your 5th Lord, and your 9th Lord. Those are all relationship astrology stuff. You want to look at the moon, and Venus and Jupiter in general for marriage and relationship purposes. You know, even Mars, even the sun, like they all do play a part. This relationship technique that we're going to view today is an important relationship technique given by Ernst to give us an understanding of what we can expect from the satisfaction of our partner in our relationship. And he has several other videos that kind of help us to give us clues when we have difficulty with this. You know, if I look up Jupiter is your man, he's got other videos such as, for example, how to fix your man, which basically means how do you fix your relationship to your Jupiter. Because in Vedic astrology, you know, when we want to look at a relationship, we don't necessarily look at the other person. You can find your spouse in your own chart based on the positions of your chart and the relationship factors in your chart. And your relationship to your partner is kind of something that comes from you. You attract a partner based on these techniques and all things in astrology. And if you want to fix it, it's usually your interaction. It's your understanding of these planets in your chart. Not necessarily, you can't use astrology to change someone, right? Or to say, oh, well, I have Jupiter in this place, which means you need to be more like this. It's an orientation towards yourself through your communication and your understanding. Because what we're going to find is that these techniques show whether we get satisfaction from our partner. And that satisfaction comes from that planet in our chart. It's our own karma. So the basis of these techniques is basically going to be coming, again, from Ernst. And as we've said, it comes from looking at Venus and Venus if you're a man, Jupiter if you're a woman, in the D7 and D9 chart. As well as we're also going to look at aspects. But first, let's cover what the D7 and D9 are. The D7 chart is a chart used in Vedic astrology. The placement of the planets in my birth chart, I'm a Leo rising, is going to, yes, this is my chart, by the way. The placement of the planets at their certain degrees is going to put these planets in certain fractal harmonics known as the Varga charts. It's kind of been described to me this way. This is how Ryan Kirksack used to describe it. If you play a guitar and you pluck the A string of one guitar, boing, if you put that vibrating A string up to another guitar, that other guitar is going to just go zong. It's going to resonate because the harmonics in mutual resonance tend to vibrate each other. You don't even need to pluck the other guitar. The A string is just going to go wong. So Varga charts, like the Navamsha that you might have heard about, they open up when a planet is in a certain degree. All of the signs are called Rashis. That's what the Rashis are called. And Rashi means like portions. So the Rashi chart is actually not just a single chart. The Rashi chart is what defines the portions that a planet falls into in the Varga charts. It'd be a lot to describe and explain, but, that'll do for now for what we're doing. Because you guys have all heard of the Navamsha chart. And in Vedic astrology, there's like 16 main ways of dividing up the 30 degrees of each sign. And that's what creates all these different Varga charts. So my Venus falls at the very end of Virgo, at 2952 degrees of Virgo. That puts it in the Saptamsha of Virgo. And it puts it in the Navamsha of Virgo. And of course, the rules of debilitation and dignity apply in the same way in all the Vargas as they do in the birth chart. So it's not great for my Venus that it's debilitated in all three of these charts. Now, the dignity of this technique works in this way. If Venus falls into this is how Ernst Wilhelm has described it. If Venus falls into a friendly or a neutral sign, which is the sign of a friend or the sign of a neutral, and this is based on the not temporary friendships, but the permanent friendships of planets. So, for example, if Venus falls into Sagittarius, it's neutral. So you give it 30 points if it's neutral, 30 points also if it's in a friend sign. Like if Venus falls into Gemini in the Saptamsha or the Navamsha, you give it plus 30 points. If a planet is in its exaltation, its Mula Trikona, or its own house, then you can give it 60 points. If it falls into exaltation or its own sign in the Saptamsha, in the Navamsha, you award it 60 points. Now, if this planet falls into an enemy sign, a natural enemy sign, or its debilitation, then you're going to give it minus 60 in the Saptamsha and the Navamsha. So, of course, in this case, my Venus is not looking so hot. It is, for the Saptamsha chart, it's minus 60, and the Navamsha chart, it's minus 60. So that's how the dignity works for figuring out the point system of the Saptamsha and Navamsha for this particular technique. Right? So now let me give you guys the example, the rundown of how this is going to look when you apply it methodically to somebody's chart, right? So we've just saw my Venus. It falls into, we're going to be basically going between these two things. So I'm going to look at my Venus. I know it's in the Saptamsha chart. It falls into Virgo. That's where Venus is debilitated. So we can give my Venus, I guess I could say, the Darakaraka for my chart is Saturn. And we're going to start using it in a moment. So we know that my Venus in the D7 chart is awarded minus 60 points, right? Now, the Dasamsha chart relates with, the Saptamsha chart. I hope I said that correctly. The Saptamsha chart relates with the joy that we get in a Venusian way. I always say on my channel, if you've heard me, I talk about how there's a difference between Jupiter love and Venus love. Venus love is the ooey gooey kissy enjoyment that we get out of things. And the Saptamsha chart relates, the D7 chart relates to that Venusian enjoyment that we get. It's, in this case, for me as a man, Venus is the Venusian, Venus in the Saptamsha chart is the Venusian enjoyment that I get out of what's already Venus, which is Venusian enjoyment. So it's the enjoyment, the satisfaction, the intimacy that I get to enjoy, and the richness of intimacy that I experience when I am in relationship with somebody. For Venus falling into Virgo, you'll watch Ernst's video. I highly recommend to watch Ernst's Venus is Your Woman video, because you'll see him describe a little bit more of each one. In essence, Venus, when it's debilitated, it tends to not feel satisfied. It tends to want to almost like wander to, since it's never satisfied with its one partner, it often will seek other partners. It's hard to commit because Venus in this D7 is supposed to give us an enjoyment to our path in life, to what we commit ourselves to what we devote to. And devotion is much easier when you get this experience of enjoyment out of it. Remember, it's not the partner's fault that you aren't getting an enjoyment out of them, because you could ditch this partner, go and find another one, you're going to get the same thing. What you have to do is align with your Venus. Listen to the enjoyment that you seek to get in a partner, and when you have a partner, see how you can get the most enjoyment out of them that you can. So for me, I have this Venus in this tricky place in the Saptamsha where it's debilitated. And then I also have Venus debilitated in the Navamsha chart, as we can see here. I'm going to move my little picture. In the Navamsha chart, my Venus is also in the sign of Virgo. That's the bottom right corner here. So both of these are not looking good to my Venus on the whole, right? The Navamsha chart has more to do with the soul satisfaction that you get out of your partnership and out of the devotion that you experience with your partner. Now remember, of course, if you're a woman or if you identify as a woman, you're going to flip this and use Jupiter instead, right? But it'll be generally the same. If you are a woman and your Jupiter is debilitated in the Saptamsha, Jupiter would be debilitated in Capricorn, then that would show a lack of enjoyment in the man that you devote yourself to. The pleasure wouldn't be quite fully there. And it's the pleasure that helps us commit to our devotional partner. Now, if you're a woman and you have Jupiter debilitated in Capricorn in the Navamsha chart, then you would be feeling a lack of spiritual gratification from your partner, right? Whatever man you get, you're going to feel like you're wasting your life. You're wasting the deepest truth and enjoyment of spiritual satisfaction. You're going to feel like your partner is not conducive to your spiritual path. They might be of a different religion, a different spiritual path, and they don't support what you're deeply trying to devote yourself to in your life. Of course, this only means that your partnership karma involves a partner who's not necessarily involved with your personal spiritual truth and your path. What you have to do in this case is make sure that you connect to your own Jupiter, or to your Venus if you're a man. Connect to your own devotional power, the thing that's going to fulfill and satisfy your soul to the deepest content that you can. Reflect, practice meditation, experience yoga, write down in your journal, what is it that I truly seek in this life? And how can I communicate this to my partner? You've got to develop your own devotional essence through your connection to this devotional planet. See it in yourself and communicate with your partner that this is what I need to operate in order to be most satisfied. You have to make that connection in yourself. Write it down in your journal. How would I like to enjoy my partner the most? And then communicate with them. How would I like to get spiritual satisfaction out of my partnership the most? And communicate it with them. And at some level, this might mean that you have to create it for yourself outside of your relationship. For me, I got to do this with my Venus. I'm a very auto-spiritual person, like I do a lot of spiritual yoga work, meditation, and these things, and it's hard to really mesh my partner in that. But I'm learning to do it, and I have to expect that there's some level where my partner will never satisfy what I'm seeking to get through Venus completely. Doesn't mean I can't have a partner. Doesn't mean I can't commit to a partner. Doesn't mean I can't have a fulfilling and satisfying relationship. But the Venus side of it, I can't expect my partner necessarily to completely fulfill. Although we're going to see that I'm getting some aspects that make my Venus's life a little easier. But before we get into aspects, let's next talk about the Darakaraka. So as we can see here, my Darakaraka is Saturn. So the Darakaraka is providing the same function as Venus for a man and Jupiter for a woman. The Darakaraka is, of course, the planet with the in your chart. And this is, of course, from the first 7 classical planets, from Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. Saturn, in my chart, has the lowest amount of degrees in its sign, right? It's the opposite of the Atmakaraka. And you can always find it in Kala by looking up the Charakarakas, and that's these guys here. When you look at the top, you see I have Venus Atmakaraka, and I have Saturn as my Darakaraka. So whatever's going on with Saturn is going to signify some similar things to how the Atmakaraka relates to myself. The Darakaraka relates to what I can expect in a spouse. It's very important, especially to look at the Darakaraka in the Navamsha chart to see what kind of spouse your heart truly pines for in a lot of ways. Now, what Ernst tells us to do in his videos is to apply the same rubric that we see with our relationship planet to the Darakaraka. So let's take a look at my Saturn. Okay, Saturn for me is in the first 3 degrees of Aquarius. In the Saptamsha chart, this translates to being in Aquarius. So, of course, Saturn is very happy in its own sign of Aquarius in my Saptamsha chart. So, thankfully, I get to put plus 60 on my Darakaraka. Now, what's next for Saturn is we're going to look at where it's placed in my Navamsha chart. Now, the first 0 to 3 degrees of Aquarius puts Saturn in the Navamsha of Libra, and that's where Saturn is exalted. So, thankfully, I get to put plus 60 to my Darakaraka, Saturn. So Venus as a relationship planet is not looking so good. I can't necessarily expect to get too much of the joy out of Venus in relationships. But my Darakaraka, Saturn, is a way of gaining me relationship joy. I can understand this. I have a pretty good placed Saturn in general. It's also my 7th lord. It's also my 6th lord. Leo rising generally has a hard time in relationships anyway. That's just how Leo is. So, and of course, Leo's 7th lord is one of its enemies, but that's often the case. The 7th sign from the rising sign generally can have a bit of antagonism. Saturn, as my Darakaraka, is well placed in the Saptamsha and the Navamsha. So for me, there is a feeling that Saturn, the maturity that I apply in relationships, there is you can look at the specifics of it in each one. In my Saptamsha chart, Saturn is in Aquarius, so there is a playfulness that I seriously apply through Saturn in the Saptamsha chart. Remember, the Saptamsha is the Venusian pleasure that you get out of every planet. Saturn being my Darakaraka, I experience a Venusian joy, a playful, pubescent, intimate, and erotic and sexual joy out of Saturn being its serious self. This, I think, lends to me to being able to be mature in relationships, mature about the pleasure that my partner seeks and that I seek, advocating for it. Santosha is a great example of a niyama that you can use. Santosha is listening to the joy and contentment that you want in a relationship and seriously applying it through Saturn, in my case. And that seems to give me some enjoyment in relationships for myself and probably for my partner too. Now, it's the same sort of thing goes on with the Navamsha chart, except that it's the spiritual satisfaction that you get out of applying your Darakaraka in the Navamsha chart. My Saturn falls into Libra, where Saturn is exalted in the Navamsha chart. So this gives a certain sense of Saturn showing up for the other person, being willing to serve, put energy and to feel good about surrendering and serving the partnership, showing up for responsibilities, being there for dates, on time, considering my commitments with my partner to be important, giving as much value to my partnerships as I receive. I'm very serious about these things, and this allows me a lot of room for grace in developing relationships. So we can see the Saturn way of me putting myself in relationships, applying a sense of value to them, and enjoying the interaction of primal values. I often find that I'm often helping my partners grow a lot. I'm a very serious partner in relationship. When there's important things that I know that they have to do, I'm going to show up for them. Sometimes I'm a little dry about it because I lack the Venus, so thankfully I still get partners who appreciate the Darakaraka in me. Even if you don't have any goodness in the Venus or your relationship planet or the Darakaraka, you can still be conscious of the nature of your Darakaraka, the nature of your relationship planets, the pratfalls that are expected from their placements in the Saptamsha and Navamsha, and accept them, move through the pain associated with them, like I have to with my Venus, and try to use other relationship factors in your chart, the 7th house, the 4th house, the 5th house, and the 9th house especially. Look to the qualities of all these things to make known for yourself what are the values that you seek in a relationship that can help compensate for lacking these relationship joy figures. That's what this technique is kind of showing here. Now we're only halfway through using this technique, okay? The next thing you want to look up is the aspects of every planet. So I've lined this up where I'm going to talk about Saturn's first. So the Sun is aspecting Saturn. Now let's just digest a little bit here, okay? Let's first understand that planets have friends and enemies. You'll know this from watching my channel as well as Ernst Wilhelm's. There's these Lajitaadi Avastas. It's when an enemy or a friend planet is aspecting your planet. Now, usually with Lajitaadi Avastas, you'll find that I'm used to using the Shadbala, so it's like, for example, we have my moon here is conjunct Mercury in the sign of Sagittarius. Mercury is a friend to the moon. So whatever is Mercury's full Shadbala score, if you look at my Mercury's Shadbala, it has 440 total points. So all those points are going to be given to my moon as delight, right? So that's how we usually do Lajitaadi Avastas, is that the planet that's getting delighted is getting a percentage of the total Shadbala based on the strength of the aspect. Now, Ernst tells us when he uses this technique, you can just look at the aspect and break that down to how much out of 60 points you are getting. A yoga is a complete aspect. So we're going to get to my Venus in a moment. For now, we're talking about Saturn. Saturn is not conjunct any other planets, but Saturn does have aspects. Okay, so the first aspect we're looking at, the sun is giving, it's sort of a square almost that's kind of happening. The sun technically has trines that the sun usually operates through in Vedic astrology. Now this Saturn is not in a full trine with the sun, but it's in enough of an angle from the sun that the sun gives it 30 points of aspect. So that's where this first little marker on my Darakaraka Saturn is getting its first minus points. The sun is an enemy to Saturn. And so the sun, therefore, the pushiness inside of me is going to add a little extra agitation when it comes to my relationships. All my partners have to experience this and deal with it. It's my hot-headed Leo energy probably makes it an extra bummer when my Saturn, which is a point of joy in my partnerships. I'm always there to help my partners, but my sun is going to add a bit of extra abrasion in there. So why else do my partners hate me? We can see the moon gives me -7 points. So the moon is aspecting Saturn at 7 points. We can see it's less of that, it's almost more of like a sextile, but not even fully sextile. So it's only at 7 points added. The moon is an enemy to Saturn. So my moon gives -7 points. Not a big deal. What else is happening here? We have my Mars. That's a bit more of a dinger of an aspect. That's a real dinger. So Mars here, Mars has a natural 4th house aspect in Vedic astrology. So the first square ahead of Mars is almost like a full aspect. Now this Saturn isn't at 16 degrees of Aquarius. It's still not quite in Mars's full aspect, but that's still 38 points. So Mars is hitting Saturn at 38 points of Graha aspect. That's -38 from Mars, right? So that's definitely dwindling some of the good stuff coming from my Darakaraka Saturn. Mars, again, same thing as the sun in a way. There's a pushiness that comes from Mars that adds agitation to when my Saturn is Mr. Serious and helping my partner in relationships. The building that I do, the commitments that I do, comes with a little extra gruffness because of that Mars aspecting Saturn. The good news is that we also have some Mercury delight towards Saturn. Mercury is a friend to Saturn. So we see Mercury in my chart is hitting Saturn at about 12 points of aspect. So Mercury gives me the ability to communicate a bit more. It's only 12 points. It's not huge. But Venus, thankfully, is a friend of Saturn, and it is kind of got a pretty strong trine going to Saturn. We see Venus is at, if we were to almost say that Venus is pretty much at 1 degree of Libra, Saturn is at 1 degree of Aquarius. So this Venus is giving a pretty strong trine to Saturn, and that's why it has that 30 plus 31 points of aspect. It's a very nice thing. When you look at all of this together, the 60 plus 100 plus 60 in the D7 and D9, that's 120 points, plus another 31 brings us up to 151. Plus 12 is 163. Then we add all the minuses together, we get -75. The total from both of them is plus 85. When you bring it all together, my Darakaraka has plus 85 points in total. That's pretty good. It's especially good from the D7 and D9. They totally saved my ass. I got a great Saturn in my chart. I'm blessed for it. I would almost say that it would still be tough for me to connect with people in relationships, and it is tough for me. Relationships can be a tough thing for me. I'm super finicky and fickle about it. I hate to admit it, but it's true. And a lot of this comes from my Venus. But my Saturn, as my Darakaraka, knows in a good relationship when I smell it, and I can commit to it, and I can do the things necessary to get enjoyment out of this relationship. Because as we're going to see, I'm ultimately more good points than bad. So let's take a look now at what's going on with my Venus, right? We know Venus isn't doing so hot in the D7 and the D9. Now, the moon is an enemy to Venus, and it's giving it -9. We see the moon is aspecting Venus at 9 points. We see that Jupiter is delighting Venus. That is the big extra cool thing, but also we're going to find that Saturn is delighting it as well. But this is a key one for my Venus. Whew, it's like, wiping the sweat from my brow here, is that Venus is conjunct Jupiter, and Jupiter delights anything that touches. Jupiter doesn't need to be a friend to a planet. When Venus is conjunct any planet, it gives it delight, gives it plus 60 points. So there is a Jupiterian sense of delight that I get from my relationships through Venus. So I actually do get a best friend experience from partners. Partners tend to really love my Jupiter. I'm very, just laughable. I have a lot of passion. There's sexual enjoyment that comes from Jupiter, although unfortunately this also starves my Jupiter. Jupiter's kind of rocked by my situation in my chart too. But Venus being the main relationship planet, Jupiter is delighting it and giving it this extra 60 points, which brings me enjoyment as well as my partner. Now, another great thing is that Venus's friend Saturn is giving 31 points of aspect to this Venus. I'm going to minimize this and minimize this. Sure, that works. So we see in my chart, we have Venus here, and we look that Saturn is aspecting Venus at 31 points. So Venus is getting 31 points of aspect from Saturn. Even though Saturn is a malefic, Venus has Saturn for a friend. Now, whenever Saturn is conjunct something, it's going to starve that planet, and it's not a good thing. But as Saturn aspecting another planet, if it's a friend to Saturn, it will get some delight. So here, this is more Saturn saving my ass and adding, when Saturn delights Venus, Venus becomes discerning about how it's going to enjoy. It becomes serious about exploring the ways that it can enjoy the good in a partner. And it also doesn't take it too personally. Saturn helps us endure things. So my Saturn helps me to appreciate the good in a partner and to be kind of okay with the negative things I experience with a partner, with the aspects of a partner that I don't like. So Jupiter and Saturn really save my Venus's ass. When we combine them together, we see that there's plus 91, right? We have plus 60 from Jupiter delight, and then plus 31 from the delight from Saturn's aspect. Altogether, that's plus 91 points. Now, when we look at the minus, we have minus 60 plus minus 60 plus 9 equals minus 129. When you add it all together for my Venus, it's minus 38. So things are ultimately a little bit bleaker for my Venus in total. But my Darakaraka Saturn is looking pretty happy-chappy. When you combine these two together, we can see that ultimately that would be, 50, 42. Is that right? No, 47. So that would be plus 47 in total for how you would look at the total relationship points coming from my Venus and my Saturn. So it would be plus 47, and my Darakaraka Saturn, I can lean on that as being one of the key reasons that a partner would partner with me, and one of the key enjoyments, one of the key powers that I have naturally at my disposal to help compensate for my lacking Venus, which will in some ways, I can expect it to bring me difficulty in relationships. I gain great partners. I'm lucky. My Venus is conjunct Jupiter. So Jupiter brings me great partners. It's my feeling that I'm not satisfied that tends to happen with me. But I compensate for this in ways by communicating in a very serious way through Saturn what I expect in relationships. In order for me to be satisfied with a relationship, I am very clear about what my needs are. And I communicate with my partner when something is happening that frustrates me. And sometimes I have to compromise with my partner. Compromise is very important for me. All of my relationships take on a very important, weighty energy of us compromising with each other. Once we get it through, there's much enjoyment to be had. My partners tend to love how I use Saturn in my relationships in this way. This is my experience. I'm the one having the experience, take whatever bias you can out of it. But this is, for me, I found for myself to be a very important relationship technique. And in the charts of people that I love, that I've explored, that I've used it with, I can see where they would be falling into the same things, lacking relationship satisfaction. And there are some people who might find that relationships are not, they're a draining thing for them. I have people in my personal life who are very minus in both categories, and they find that relationships are draining. They don't feel like it's worth being in them. But in my opinion, if you read this, if you watch this whole video, I want you to recognize that just because you see this video and you might find that you've got negative dispositions towards your relationship planet and your Darakaraka planet, if you've got minus in both, it would be very important for you to still consider that there are many reasons why you would still find yourself being roped in and entangled in relationships. And they're still important karma for many people. Soul relationship karma, if you have karma to deal with somebody, they're going to love you. They're going to experience the merging of your soul, regardless of astrology. Astrology can only take you so far in the realm of love. Love is a soul phenomenon that combines people together, and astrology shows us some of the expected results that we can expect. If it is your karma to be bonded to a person, astrology kind of doesn't matter at some level in terms of the destiny of you connecting with this person. What astrology can do is show you where you might not experience satisfaction in your relationship in a way that, again, what I always say, when there's difficulty in any realm of your human life, this incarnation is a cleanup incarnation for you, where you're not necessarily meant to get it easy. But the reason you're not getting relationship karma easy is because you've probably been working on other things. You've probably been working on your first house, on yourself, on your career, on things that are less related to you finding enjoyment in relationships. But every dimension of human experience is important, especially if relationships feel important to you. Especially if you've got the moon's nodes, like I do, in feminine signs, Cancer and Capricorn in my case. If you've got a lot of planets in feminine signs, the feminine signs are a bit more about what you are, what you experience, and what you have. The fire and air signs are about what you do. So for some people, you can have not the greatest relationship enjoyment and experience, but some people, like men especially, who have lots of fire and air karma, or even women who have lots of fire and air karma, they're going to be in their relationship. They're going to, still cater to it ideally, but if you really lack these relationship signatures, you might find that your relationships aren't as important to you as other parts of your life. I still recommend, for your partner's sake and for your sake, that you take care of your weaknesses. Take care of the things that you don't tend to think about. This is what astrology does for us, is it gives us reminders of the things that we have not been working on in this incarnation, so we can come to stop the drainage, the unnecessary drainage that comes from acting on impulse. If you're completely impulsive about your relationships and you have bad relationship karma, you're going to make yourself and your partner suffer more than you need to. So even if you have bad relationship karma, you still have a 7th house, you still have a 4th house, you still have a partner at home, if you have a partner. And you should still be accountable to that dimension of your life. You know, focus on it as much as you can. Communicate with your partner to get the most that you can out of them. And especially if you have this, again, this not strong relationship karma through these techniques, it doesn't mean that you're doomed in relationships. It means that you have a little bit of work to do in how you are in relationship with relationships. And you have work that you've got to do here. And it can be very satisfying work, because this is a karma that you're probably moving through anyway. Now, for those, not everybody needs to be in relationship. If you find, however your karma is, even if you've got great relationship planets and you don't feel called to be in relationship, consider this to be the relationships that you have with everybody in your life, with your family, with your friends, with coworkers, and with yourself. What's the spiritual satisfaction? You know, what's the satisfaction that you get in relationships through the Saptamsha, even if it's not a marriage relationship? And what is the enjoyment that you get out of your ashram, your spiritual devotion in life, which is the Navamsha point? And if there's no satisfaction in any of these places indicated through these techniques, you've got to A, accept it at some level, and B, do what you can to nurture that planet in your life. Nurture the Jupiter in your life if you're a woman. Nurture the Venus in your life if you're a man. Think about Venusian things if you're a man. Think about water. Go and meditate by water. Bring energy up through your Svadhisthana chakra. Let it resonate in your heart chakra. This is important for all these points. If you're missing, or if you need anything in your Jupiter, if you're a woman, Venus if you're a man, or the Darakaraka, breathe energy up into your heart chakra and feel empathy and sit with how your nervous system resonates with love, the vibration of love. Go to therapy. Explore your early childhood and ask yourself, what happened with my parents that made me feel like relationships don't satisfy me? What happened with my siblings? What happened with my early relationships? Was I late bloomer in puberty while everyone else was blooming? Are there things that I can look back in my past and remediate through understanding in this present moment, so that this is not only not a drain to me, but I can orient myself in relationships so that it's in perfect alignment and harmony, even with what little it sometimes has for some people in this incarnation. Doesn't need to be amazing. Relationships don't need to save you. But if they are draining you, use astrology to remediate, to use therapy, talk to the ones you love, and learn and communicate how to make relationships in your life work for you, no matter what state of karma they're in. That was a lot, but I had to explain it this way because this is what relationships are to us. For a lot of people, they're inevitable. For all of us, our relationship planets are a part of who we are. Relationships are a part of who we are, whether we get married or not. So we might as well use self-realization and reflection and meditation and yoga to put ourselves in harmony, in alignment with it. Realization, knowledge, and awareness never hurts. I'm Dustin Cormier. Thank you to Ernst Wilhelm for this wonderful technique. I'm glad I got to do my own little spin on it. Check out Ernst's videos to learn a bit more in depth about this technique. I just wanted to kind of give my own take on what it's all about, so you can see me using it in my cold readings and you can get a sense of what it's all about. So thanks so much for watching, everybody. Take care.